This week I'm talking about why the US dollar is so strong and what that means. So how is it that the US dollar is so strong, yet our investment market is in ruins and the global economy is suffering through inflation? Well, one of the biggest theories is the dollar smile theory. And it may sound funny, but what essentially ends up happening is a lot of these global countries flock to the US dollar. So in times when the US dollar is very strong, a lot of the global currencies will flock to the US to buy up those dollars, knowing that our economy is doing really well. So that's at one end of the spectrum. When you look at the other end of the spectrum, it has to do with global economies being very, very weak, which seems to be more the case right now. And then when you have that bottoming out of the smile, that is typically the case for the US in a really weak economy. So how is it that the US dollar is so high right now when we compare it to all these other currencies? Well, the big reason is the Fed is increasing interest rates. And as they're doing that, a lot more of these global countries are flocking to that US dollar because they see interest rates rising, which means treasury bills are increasing and the yield is going to be higher, or the interest rates that they're giving off to hold some of these things are going up. And one of the other main drivers is that global countries hold the US dollar as reserve currency as part of their central bank. So if you remember, in the US, we have the Federal Reserve Bank, which basically dictates the monetary policy, whether they're increasing interest rates or decreasing interest rates, which can directly affect the economy. Not just because the dollar is always in demand, but additionally, our government in our country is a lot safer than a lot more of these other outside countries and the conflicts that they are currently going through. For example, Russia, Ukraine. How can you trust what the governments are going to be doing over there, or that the economies aren't going to be greatly affected, which will obviously impact the different currencies that are exchanged for goods? And so with the US staying out of all of that and currently going through our own economic cycle, a lot of the outside countries are looking to the US because they know we're a strong country. We know we're dictated a lot by the Federal Reserve, which comes out with minutes to tell everyone essentially what they're trying to do. And so it can be more of a safe haven for other countries to, again, hold US dollars. And when you're holding those dollars, that helps raise the price. Now, obviously, a lot of that fear is driven out of a lot of this global economic crisis that is happening. Mainly, inflation is still running really, really hot, not just within the US, but outside of the US. And with the coming winter and the energy crisis that may start taking place in Europe because of Russia essentially shutting off the pipelines to all the other countries, that may also begin to spike inflation, which creates these cycles, could lead to some global recession. And that again means that other countries are looking to the US as a safe haven because of what's going on around them. And so when you think about that initial picture that I showed, it is the risk aversion. That's why the US dollar is becoming so much stronger. So what does this mean for us, especially in the US? Well, number one, it means that traveling may have gotten a lot cheaper. Now, even though traveling has gotten a little cheaper, I'm talking about when you exchange the dollar when you're already there. When you look at airfares and the cost of flying somewhere, it is still pretty darn high given where inflation costs are. Mainly around fuel cost, right? We know energy has been one of the biggest drivers of inflation because of what's happening in that sector. What this means is that imports may start to get cheaper because the US dollar has gotten stronger, and exports have essentially gotten more expensive. Because when we're exporting those goods, we're essentially exporting those costs to those outside countries. And so we create this effect where we're exporting inflation also across the globe, which doesn't help, but here within the US, it helps isolate us because it makes those imports a lot cheaper. So what will ultimately turn the tide on this trend where the US dollar has been so strong? Well, it really comes down to the global economy. So as the global economy becomes more stabilized, which is a big ask, especially what's going on with the war raging, that's when you'll start to see most likely some of this calming down with the US dollar. But for now, as a US consumer and maybe as a US traveler, you can reap some of those benefits, especially in some of the regions like Europe, where the pound and the euro have gotten so much cheaper, which means your dollar goes a lot farther than it ever has before. I hope this gives you some idea and insight into why the US dollar has gotten so strong, and not just within the US, but how it affects globally all the other nations and what it looks like for us going forward. If you have questions, comments, or concerns, let me know in the comments or shoot me an email. I hope you have a great day and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Take care.